Good morning, everybody. I'm announcing I'm starting a new series today. One of my first projects here for this series, I have this engine, Prewar 259, pretty common. They made a lot of these. This one runs well, but when it does run, it has a grinding sound, and seems like the gear plate right here seems to be rubbing up against the gear post and gear that drives the wheels. I'm going to check that out, and to do that I'm going to have to take the engine, or take the motor out of the engine. So I'm going to show folks how to do that, because there probably are still a lot of these out there that people own that run them. They may have a couple of these that don't work well, and they don't take them apart to fix them. They don't have the ability, or don't know how, or whatever. So I'm going to take the trucks off the back. I just pry the clip, horseshoe clip. I pry that open a little bit, take that out, get it out of the way, and see, I don't want to lose it down in there. It's off. Okay, here we go. Take that off, take the truck off, store the little pieces in a cup. That way I'll have those. I won't be losing too many things. And we'll continue here. Take the drive rods loose. This one happens to have a small flathead screw that undoes this. Some have a little hex-headed nut or bolt that holds that on. From the factory, at the time it was supplied with a little hex-headed bolt to do that. Over the years it must have got lost. So I'm going to take this loose, take the spacer out. I'll leave that rod on for now. Do the same thing to this side. I'm going to take this screw out of here, and there's a little washer that goes with it, and that actually keeps the drive rod, the main rod, on secure. And it has a little oblong hole in it. It's not round, it's actually squared on two sides, because the post is that way, and that's what keeps everything kind of rolling snug where it don't flop around. So it's fitted for that reason. Take the spacer out. So that's kind of freed from the steam chest and the slide rods. Hex-headed. Let me see which size that is. Is this it? No. I know I got one here for it. Go into my socket, little pile of sockets. I have a bunch of these. Here we go. I think that's it. So we're going to take this nut off that holds the motor into the frame. Real quick, we'll take that out of there. Put that there. And we should be able to get this up in the air and up out of there in decent shape. So the motor's here. I'm going to put this aside for now, and we're going to work on why this is rubbing. So everything looks in order. You can see it's pretty clean. You know, I've had this engine for quite a while and never ran it that much, and I started to run it, and I noticed the rubbing noise and the grinding it does. So that, I know that's not right. So I have these pieces of wood I have around all the time. Helps me keep things kind of flat. So I have several blocks, different thicknesses and sizes, because every motor is kind of different. But this will help me keep this flat before I can work on it. So right here is where I'm seeing the grinding noise up here. So I'm going to take this off here real quick. This plate actually guides the armature pin through to keep it centered, and it also, on this model, it's pretty junked up, even though it was worked on all not long ago. So the armature's right here. This guide holds it center, and then I might have to take the wheels off of this one to take those gears off and see what's going on. I think I have a couple gears, but I'm going to take this off anyway. I hate taking the wheels off because of the fact that sometimes putting them back on, and you got to get these synchronized. You see how the wheel is made. It has a simulated weight on ends. In the old days, that served a purpose. Here, it kind of just makes it for show, but you got to see how they're kind of lined up. You want to do that when you put them back on, because these rods moving back and forth, if they're not synchronized from front to back and side to side, these will jam up and they won't, and the wheels won't turn. So one of the methods I use, I have a gear puller and a wheel puller, but I found it simpler just to get a couple screwdrivers with a wider blade and kind of go underneath the drive wheel and just pry up. And the way I do that, I just twist it, just turn it real easy. The bottom wheel usually falls off with the rod. That's okay. This will pull right out. And remember, if you leave this one on or not, doesn't matter, but if you leave that one on, when you put this set of wheels back on, you know, just kind of line it up again best you can, and always put the rod on. And if everything centers properly with the rods, when you put this bolt back in, you should be in pretty good shape. I'll show you that on the way after we're done taking a look at this gear. So with that said, I'll take this gear off and see what's going on with it. The back side of the plate, as you can see, I'm going to wipe some of this goo off of here. I got some paper towels here. Looks like some kind of a hairy beast was run over by this thing, and a clump of hair and grease came out. But that's what happened over time. You can see there's actually somewhere something is pressing down on this gear enough to scar the frame, and it actually has wore the corners of this plate. So riding with this spinning, the gears now are actually rubbing up against the plate. In the old days when this was made, this plate was to just rest over top of the pin, and with that on top of the pin holding it down, there was no need for a bolt or a nut to hold the gears on. That plate did that, as you can see. If I center it up, that plate actually holds the gear down on the pin. But wear over time, over use, has changed that to some degree now, and it's wearing, and that grinding noise, it's almost like a little saw blade. I can hear it when the train runs around the track. So it could be a combination of a couple things that I may not be able to fix. If the pin is wore a little short, if the gear is rubbing because of the plate is tight. I've actually taken some of these apart, and I saw guys who put them on backwards, and that gives a little bit of life back to a plate because it's not worn on that side. But as you can see, they're not exactly the same on both sides. This bushing in there is in pretty good shape. Some of the times these get worn out, they get egg-shaped, and then that causes the armature to kind of roll funny. I don't know if this would actually do any good to do it this way. So I'm going to take a quick peek at my gears and see if I have another one of these, if it does the same thing. Let's see what I got here. I got a whole bunch of little parts. Let's see here. I think that's slightly different. I think that's let me see what we got here. Yeah, this one's a little, this is a different gear. this is also a different gear. A lot of gears. Every engine has sort of a different gear scenario. I may not have one for this. Doesn't look like I do in stock right here. I buy parts and pieces when I can, where I can, because it's getting to the point where these aren't available anymore. It's hard to find things and parts for this pre-war engine. These were made in, I think, a long stretch of time, from the mid to late 20s up until almost 39 or 40. So these are kind of everywhere. So you can still buy gears if you find them on eBay or wherever. My parts guy that I buy from, great guy, has a lot of parts on stock. He's been helping me out for several years, and he hasn't really let me down. There's a few times where he has to apologize. He just don't have it, or he's out of them and he has no source for them anymore himself, because the people who make these things, or used to make them, just don't anymore. You may be able to find some reproductions, but you're taking a little bit of chance there that they'll even fit. So anyway, I'm going to take a little bit of cleaner here and a Q-tip. I use alcohol, rubbing alcohol. It does a pretty good job. And I'm going to get a little bit of this stuff off of here. You can also use electronic cleaner and degreaser. You don't want to use like automobile degreaser, but they do make an electronic cleaner and degreaser, which works really good on stuff like this. When I'm doing a major motor work, I'll get that degreaser and shoot it down in and clean all this out, take this all apart, and then wipe it all down. And it takes decades of grease and grime up out of there, and does a pretty good job of that. So, like I said, it seems to me that I'm gonna try that little trick there that I've seen done. I'm gonna put this on backwards and see what that does to this mechanism, if anything. If it improves it. If not, I will have to get with my parts guy and see if he can hook me up with some gears, and maybe even a new gear plate that's not all wore out. I mean, I think that's part of the problem. And the tolerance between the wheel, the geared wheel, and the frame, that tolerance is pretty set in stone. You can't back it off. You can't back the wheels off to stop rubbing, because they need to be a certain dimension apart. The spread has to be right to fit between the tracks and the rails. So that has to remain the same. And I mean, this is still going to turn freely. And actually, as of right now, I'm not feeling that grinding, and I'm not hearing anything, but the wheel's not on yet. So that's what's going to tell the story. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to slip this back on just kind of temporarily. Not lining it up in any special way. I just want to see if I can hear that a little bit. Just a little bit. But I think I'm gonna try it, because it won't take long to put this back together. Just enough to get the wheel on. I'm gonna take this off too. If I can get this back here to where it works without any issue, I think what I'll do is I'll have to put this in the press real quick. Excuse me 1 second. I'm going to keep talking while I'm doing this. I have a little press right here that I use to press my wheels on with. So just to make sure I have the wheel in place, and I'm going to squeeze this down a little bit, get the gears meshed up. There we go. All right. So as you can see, I got the wheels pressed back on, and this wheel is engaging on that gear, and I still hear it a little bit. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to pop it on the test track here real quick, and we'll see if this goes around. Yeah, it still makes the noise a little bit, so I'm going to retrieve that over here and bring it back. You can hear that noise it makes is that gear rubbing and the wheel rubbing up against that motor. It's just they're just the gear on the wheel and the gear and the drive system are just wore enough that it's going to make a little bit of noise when it goes around, and I just don't like that noise, so that's the only reason I'm fooling with it. Taking these apart, they're not a real easy thing to do, but I've done it so many times it only takes a few minutes now to do it, which is kind of nice. The reason I'm showing folks how to do that is, again, like I said, I've been doing this for a while. I've taken apart a lot of motors, different brands, American Flyer, Marks, Ives, Dorfin, and some other imports from Europe, whatever. The best way to figure it out is to do it and figure it out. There's not a lot of books out there anymore, very few, if you can find them, that show you how to do it. I wish there was. You just gotta take a good look at it, and as you take things apart, lay them out where you can see them and you know how they go back together. I've taken these all the way apart where the frame was split open, and I took the armatures out. I rewired the whole thing. I rebuild, E-units all the time, and the processes have gotten easier and better over the years because I've got a couple new tools that aren't expensive, but tools that help you work on things like this. So I have the equipment, tools, all that kind of stuff to do it, and parts, so on and so forth. Not a lot of folks have that opportunity, or the parts, or the source for the parts. I hate to see trains get put away or tossed out or sold because they don't work. People say, well, this don't work anymore, and they put them on sale for eBay, which is good for me. I'll buy them up. I get them at some pretty cheap prices because people think they're broken. Once I get them here, I put them on a track and it hums, but it don't move. I'll find out that the wheels are out of synchronization. Like I said earlier, this cross rod, you want this cross rod, once it's slid on the post, you want it to be centered on that hole. When you have that, you know that you have this in the right spot. So if you put this in and tighten that up, it will line itself up to where the bar will go around and not bind. If this is in the wrong spot and you put that nut on there, actually, if you try to do it like that, it just will bind up and it won't go. Sometimes that's what people have it. They say the wheels are locked up, it must be burned out. It's very hard to destroy these motors. They're fairly simple. They're not anything that you have to be an electronical genius to work on. But like I said in the beginning, I did not work on a lot of these myself because I really didn't have the knowledge and didn't want to take something apart and not be able to put it back together. Once I bought some considered junkers from other people, I took them apart because I had nothing to lose and found out that they did have working parts on them, and it was either a broken wire, loose wire, um, a brush had fallen out. Because they get so short, they can actually fall out. And sometimes it's just as simple as the wheels are out of synchronization. So, like I said, if you have an engine that doesn't run, or it hums but won't move, or doesn't do anything at all, it doesn't mean it's dead, doesn't mean it's trash. You could send it to me, and I'll fix it or work on it if it's fixable. But without saying it, it's hard for me to make an assessment. But they aren't all as difficult as it sounds. So I'm going to be doing, in the future, I'm going to be doing a series on engines, engine repairs. I do Lionel because I think most people have Lionel. I can do some series on Ives, Marks, some other manufacturers upon requests. And I also refinish trains. Any rolling stock, engines, whatever, I strip them down to the bare metal, and then I either use a chemical paint remover, or I have a small sandblaster, a media blaster, that I blast them, get them down to bare metal, and I have a paint process that I use. And I also have a powder coating process that I use, and depending on what type of vehicle it is, if it's a car, stock car, Pullman car, is it a caboose, how many moving parts does it have, how many body parts does it have. Sometimes it makes sense to just powder coat them with that process. That way I can handle them quickly after they've been powder coated, and put them together within 20 minutes of powder coating and reassemble them. And I have a variety of colors. I don't really restore any of the trains that I do back to the original factory colors. I do that very, very, very seldom because I think a lot of the colors from back then were boring, and there wasn't such a wide selection. I tried to do something a little bit different, a little nicer. I've sold a lot of things on eBay under the name MT.TrainRestorations. I've been doing that for quite a while now. I think I've been on eBay now about 5 years doing that. But anyway, that's what I do. Like I said, I'm going to start a series on YouTube for doing repairs, restorations, refurbishing old cars, rolling stock, engines. I do buildings, bridges, whatever. If it's metal, I will refinish it. I don't work on post-war very much. I don't do any of the modern trains at all. I don't do anything in plastic. I don't mess with the newer type motors, engines, because there's just too difficult to work on. These are upwards 75 to 100 years old. Some of the things I work on. I have a motor here. It's an Ives. This is probably, I'd have to say, if I look in the book, this is probably 1918 to 1925. It wasn't running when I first got it, but it runs now. Just needed a couple little minor things. This actually changes the direction from forward to backwards, so that sticks out of the frame. This is an Ives motor, not so much different than a Lionel. Lionel actually acquired Ives company in 1928, and by 1931, 2, and 3, they totally absorbed Ives and used some of their products, but the names Ives was not used anymore after 1933. But that's what Lionel would do, is buy up some of their competition. But anyway, here's a Marks motor I worked on the other day. I took the brushes out. We did a little video. I took the brush plate off, took the brushes out, cleaned the armature, put everything back together, put some grease on it, lubed it up real nice, cleaned the light bulb, which is the original light bulb, by the way, cleaned it off with some alcohol. It had a bunch of grime and dirt just baked onto the lens of the bulb. So again, this isn't that scary. This isn't scary stuff. You can actually work on some of these if you have some basic knowledge of how trains work, how they move forward, backwards. This is what makes them go forward and backwards. Ives has the little thing on the side. This is not a 3-position E unit. This is only 2 positions. So you give it power, it goes forward. You give it power, it goes backwards. It does not pause in neutral. That's what the 3-position E units are called. This is a 3-position E unit. You put it on one spot. This will be forward. When you hit power, it goes forward. You hit power again, it'll go into neutral. You hit power again, it'll go backwards. If you put it all the way off of that, it will go backwards all the time. I mean, so that's how these kind of things work. They're not that difficult. But again, don't be intimidated. You can always notify me, give me a holler, find me on my YouTube site, and I have an email there. You can ask questions. I'll help you any way I can, and then maybe we'll make a repair person out of you, and you can do a lot more. It'll be more fun. You'll have more fun with your trains if they run all the time. Nothing more frustrating when one develops a problem you don't know what to do with. You set it aside and try another one or put another one. Not everybody has dozens of engines to do that with. So again, that's kind of where I'm coming from, and I'm going to put this one back together. And to do that, I'm going to synchronize the cross rods and so on back again to make sure I have that right. So as you can see on this side, just to show you what happens, I just put that wheel on random. I didn't line it up yet. But you put this cross rod on, even if you turn the wheel around, you can see I can't get the whole of that wheel to be exactly where it wants to go. So even that's close, but look at the rod. It's at an angle. So you need to have these lined up where this is parallel with the edge of the frame, and that hole ends up right there. And this is not going to do it because this is going to keep moving upward. So anyway, quick fix for that is I'm going to pop this off again. I'm going to pop these off again and line them up where they're supposed to be now. And then we'll go from there. We'll line that back up. And just twist these. You don't want to pry. You'll break off edges of the wheels. You may damage the teeth on the gear. You don't want to damage these teeth. They're pretty good. They last a long time. But even with that said, they're brittle enough that you can break them off. Then the wheel really is no good after that. So we know where this one needs to be. So I'm going to put this back on. I want to line this up best I can. So again, I go by the simulated weight on the bottom of that wheel. They're pretty close. Try the rod. These usually point up. I've seen them both ways, but I put mine up. Get the little hex-headed screw. It does have a shoulder on it. It's called a little shoulder screw. That little shoulder goes through this hole, and that keeps that rotating around that shoulder. So that way you can tighten this down and it won't bind it to the wheel. It gives it that space for it to roll freely. So you can see it lines up with that hole pretty well. I'm going to put this back on this side anyway. Once you put it on the one side and kind of keep an eye on it moving around, you don't have to worry too much about losing where you're at here. But again, if you keep that tight to the gear, you'll be good. So I'm going to do this kind of just freehand. I'm going to set this down on there, and I'm going to do this one the same way. Now I'm keeping weight on that wheel for it don't jump off the gear. And then I got to put this over here and line that up. That looks pretty close. And before I push that down with the press 100%, I'm going to put my crossbar back on. Again, they point up. This is up. It looks like it might be down, but it's up. And it's a little bit off, just a little bit off. So I'm going to pop that off again here real quick, because I'm going to lift it. I'm going to lift that off a little bit. I'm going to lift that off again. I got to get that a little bit closer. That looks pretty close right there. Let's see how this goes with the bar. Yeah, see, that lines up pretty nice. So I'm going to put that on there. So, all right, so that lines up good. I press it down a little bit, so it's kind of locked in place, but not pressed down all the way, because there's little grooves on the end of this axle. So it's not going to go anywhere too fast. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to pop off again here real quick. Excuse me for 1 second. I'm going to set this on the press, and I'm going to press that wheel back down on there. And just push that down a little bit more. There we go. And I think we're back in business. Oh, there we are. So we have this wheel pressed back down in place. This geared wheel is engaged in the gear over here. And then it didn't move in the meantime, so I should be able, that cross rod lines up pretty good. So let's see if this one on the second wheel lines up like I hope. Looks like it's pretty good right there. Put that bolt back in there. Give it a couple, get it down in there. Even though it's tight, you're still loose, so it will turn. And put this on, make sure that one's back on. And let's see here. Yep, there you go. So you can see it'll go around a couple revolutions. It's in synchronization. Like I said before, sometimes you'll get that from somebody that says their wheels just are froze up. There's a lot of things to check before you disregard the train altogether. So now with that, if you want to bear with me and watch how this goes back in, that's great. I'm going to move some stuff aside here. So what we did is, by the way, yeah, this, I painted this black and gold, sort of dark yellow, whatever you want to call it. I just like the colors. It's a Steeler color. Gotta love the Steelers, right? So two little tabs, they fit right in here. There's a little notch and a little notch. Yes, it looks like it's off center, but it's not. This actually keeps this engine lined up in the center of the train correctly. Even though it looks like it's off center, they do that on purpose. So be careful with the bulb, make sure it's snug, and if there, it went right in. Then you want to make sure that this lever control is up and down straight, because it has to fit back into this slot and come out the top. If you put this together and don't have it sticking out the top, it might have fell down all the way. You don't want that. Or you could bend it. You don't want that either. So we're going to put this in, slide it in those front tabs. You can feel it go in. And let's see if we can get this to pop through here. Sometimes you got to work at them. See where that little lever is and make sure it's kind of pointing straight up and down. And sometimes as you're pushing it close, what I like to do is see if I can see it coming through. And if I see where it's at and what it's hitting, I can make sure that it's going forward enough that it will pop through here. There we go. So we're in front, we're locked in. Fits right over the stud again where the nut goes. And we're sticking through the top. Hey, that's good. 3 out of 3. So let's see, here's our we'll get to here next. We want to put that nut back on, and let's see what we can do here with this. Okay, we got that kind of secure, not a big deal. So let's go back to the rods here. So remember our spacer? Got our spacer, got that put on, then our main rod, then we have this little washer that has two squared off sides that fits around the post. It's hard to tell, I know it's probably hard to tell, but that post does have two sides that are flat and the rest is round, so you want to put that on there to where that washer fits just like that. Then the rest is fairly easy. Get this screw. These are kind of hard to deal with. I have a little magnetic screwdriver which helps me tremendously because my fingers are doing what their own thing is these days. So hold on to the wheel a little bit and make sure that washer is in place before you tighten it down there. And that's what holds that together, see? Okay, so yeah, same thing the other side, real quick. Spacer, rod, you want to make sure all this is, linkage is moving correctly. Nothing's out of place. Put that washer on. It's lined up. And we're going to put this screw in place. Hopefully, oh, okay, oh, good thing I have a magnetic screwdriver, right? So we're back to getting that on there. Okay. Okay. There it goes. So with all this said, so I know it still has an issue. It still makes a little grinding noise, which is, like I say, for me, it's not the end of the world. I do want to fix it one day. I may have to get a couple new gears to do that. I'll have to check out my parts guide before I take this apart again. These are the back trucks. These go up underneath just like that. They come out, the little hook comes up out of here. Sometimes I make sure that that's bent up a little bit because you want these to dangle down enough to go into the track and be guided by the track. You don't want them too high up because then they swivel around, and if they don't stick to the track and work properly, you're always going to be getting derailments because of this wheel's not really making good contact where it's supposed to be. So putting the horseshoe clip back on, not a big deal. Just put it in there. It slides into a little bit of a groove. Let's see. I got some curved needle nose, which is kind of nice. Let's see if we can hold this down. I just don't want this jumping around too much. Just put that down a little bit. Squeeze this together. There. So that holds that in place. This is good to go. Everything's back to normal on it. Let me see here what we got. I'm going to move this other engine over here for a moment. That's what I have it on track. I'm going to put this one on. And what I'm going to do is, I'm just going to try it. You may be able to hear it make its noise. That's the noise it makes. So, like I said, it goes around fine. It just grinds a little bit, and I don't like that. Shouldn't be doing it. So for today, that's working on a 259. There's a lot of things to do to 259s. They're a good, durable, hard-working, good running motor engine. I have several of them here. I got some 259s. I don't know if you can see those. I'll swing that over a little bit. I got some 259s here, some 258s, a couple 1681s. I like those. Those are good engines, 259s, 258s. They're good runners. I do a lot of work with them. They're inexpensive. They have very similar motors. Most of the parts that fit on the 259s come from the 258s. And now, back in the day, Lionel made a couple different 258s. They had an early version, which is completely different than this version. Not to bore you with a history lesson, but this 258 is a late model. Looks very much so like the 259s, as you can see. It just has the one cross rod, side rod. A little more simpler. They made these to be less expensive to buy than, say, this model, but they look very much alike. So same kind of motor in them for the most part. They run well. They're a good runner. They're strong. Most of them come with the weight in here to keep the weight down, for it'll get good traction. I have the weights up in one of my parts drawers, but I do a lot of these engines. I like taking them apart. I like painting them over in different colors or whatever, and making them run again, put new parts in, rebuild whatever I do, and then I sell most of them, put them back out in the market for people to have for decades to come. So that's all for today. And I'll be, look for me on YouTube. Eventually this will be coming out, and then you can follow whatever, whenever I pump out a new one. I'm under MT.TrainRestorations. My website is that. My email will be similar to that. I also am on eBay as MT.TrainRestorations for all the other stuff I do, and hopefully I'll hear from folks that need my help, and if not, maybe I can at least show some people how to repair some things simply, in that way they can keep their engine for years to come. Thanks so much for listening. Until next time, bye.